Hello, Internet. Today we're talking about my worst job ever. So, hearing fellow YouTubers Thought Slime and Philosophy Tube talk about some of the crummy jobs they've worked over the years was really cathartic, and it's helped me feel less alone, so I figured I'd toss another log on the fire and share with y'all the story of the time I taught swim lessons when I was fresh out of college. So when I was reading the job posting, it sounded really cool. I mean, I love swimming, I love teaching, except for grading. I would get to work with kids, and the pool was like super warm, which sounded amazing for someone who gets cold as easily as I do. I mean, like, right now I'm wearing like a hoodie and gloves, and I've got a blanket on, and I'm still like on the edge of shivering. I'm very cold. Um, Job sucked though. Yeah, not fun.
Grievance 1. Scheduling.
So the job posting that I was responding to was for a full-time position, but the most hours they ever actually gave me was like 25 a week or something, and that was really variable too. I mean, sometimes I would get as few as 10 hours a week, and my schedule would change like every other week, so it's basically just impossible to ever make plans. And not only was I not getting nearly enough hours, but I didn't even get paid for all the hours that I was actually at work. Like, you would only be paid for the hours you were teaching lessons, but at the end of your shift, I mean, you kind of have to shower and change, right? It's a pool. Like, you can't just leave after, soaking wet with chlorine water. So I couldn't actually, like, get in my car and drive away until, 15 or 20 minutes after my shift ended, which really adds up when you work morning shifts and evening shifts. That means there was like half an hour or 40 minutes every day that I was at work but not getting paid. And the way the hours were distributed was terrible too. Like you'd have these morning shifts, and then you'd have a super long gap in the middle of the day, and then an evening shift. So, like, you could go home in between them if you wanted, but by the time you'd like showered and changed and driven home, you'd have like maybe a couple of hours to enjoy yourself before you had to go back to work. And those hours weren't even really that relaxing because you still have the evening shift looming over you. And if you worked both of them, you wouldn't even end up with 7 hours on your time card, even though you were effectively busy the entire day. Ugh, what a nightmare. We also had these random mandatory in-service trainings and open swim nights that would be outside of normal operating hours, and sometimes you'd find out about them with like less than a week's notice, and you were just expected to cancel whatever plans you had. Like, one time I got scheduled for one on Halloween night with less than a week's notice, and they were just like, nope, sorry, sucks that you have plans, cancel them, you have to guard this. Speaking of open swim nights...
Grievance 2. Safety issues.
Something that a lot of people don't realize is how dangerous swimming can be if proper precautions are not taken. According to the World Health Organization, drowning is one of the top 5 leading causes of death for kids aged 1 to 14. Now, just keep that in mind while I paint a picture of these open swim nights for you. So this is a swim school that caters mostly towards younger kids, and like the majority of their students are not yet able to swim a single length of the pool. Oftentimes, one parent would show up with like 3 kids who don't know how to swim and expect that that was just fine and that everything was gonna be okay because, there's lifeguards. And like keeping track of 3 non-swimmers at a time in a chaotic environment would be hard for swim instructors, much less the parents who have not had any training in this. And like, yeah, there's lifeguards, but if you're relying on lifeguards in this situation, that means the lifeguards are jumping into the pool every time one of your kids gets a few feet away from you. Now, During the lifeguard training that we had to attend, they taught us all these signs that indicate that someone might be drowning and told us, if you don't know, go. Uh, Except if you actually followed that advice and jumped in every time a kid was exhibiting these signs and was in danger of drowning, you would get chewed out by the manager for making the company look bad. So that's fun. What a great thing to prioritize when kids are drowning. There were also these big foam mats that were designed for like babies to practice walking on during lessons, but during the open swims, anybody could just play with them. And they were like 3 feet by 5 feet or something like that. So you'd end up with just these huge blind spots where you have no idea if a kid is under there drowning or not when you're guarding. And they were just kind of scattered all over the pool when there were just tons and tons of people in the pool, and it was so chaotic. And the room that the pool was in was only like just a little bit bigger than the pool itself, meaning all the noise just echoed endlessly. Oh my god, the noise, the noise.
Noise.
So, for those of you who don't know, I have ADHD. Hi. And my ADHD comes with a sensory processing component that's similar to what a lot of people with autism experience. At least that's what I can gather from swapping experiences with them. Particularly loud noises are very difficult for me, very painful. And those can be especially bad if I'm stressed, like I was. If I'm hot, like I was, because the pool was like bathwater warm, so the air around the pool was also very, very warm and humid. You just very sweaty. And if the noises are loud and chaotic, which they were. So basically, I was just in constant pain and on the verge of a panic attack the entire time, every time I had to guard one of these. Oh, what a fun time. So I brought up these safety concerns with my manager, and also, like, the fact that guarding open swims was giving me panic attacks, and, you know, maybe I'm not the most effective lifeguard in the world while I'm having a panic attack. And she just told me, yeah, everyone hates guarding open swims, but we still have to do them. Sorry. So those were the open swims. And while those were definitely the most stressful part of working there, teaching the actual lessons was pretty darn stressful too. So the way that this would work is they would schedule 4 kids per class, and you had to look out for the safety of all 4 kids at all times. This means that if you were working with one student, which you usually were, like one at a time, you know, taking turns, you had to be constantly, and I mean constantly, looking over your shoulder and checking on the other 3 students who were supposed to be waiting their turn on the wall. So you had to look over your shoulder once every 5 seconds for the entire day, right? So in 1 half-hour lesson, you would have to look over your shoulder like 300 something or other times. Oh, and while we're on the topic of safety, the edge of the pool deck was super slippery. Like, most of the pool deck had this rough texture, you know, like the stickers that you put on bathtubs to help your feet grip it or whatever. But the very edge of the deck was smooth cement, which is actually surprisingly slippery when it's wet. So, in my few months of working there, I personally slipped several times. I saw kids slip, I saw parents slip, I saw other swim instructors slip, I saw other lifeguards slip, I saw the lifeguard instructor slip one time. So eventually, I decided to email my boss about it, and never heard back, because of course I didn't. So I confronted her in person, and she didn't even acknowledge that it was a safety hazard. She just told me, it has to be smooth. because otherwise the kids will scratch their stomachs when they're climbing in or out of the pool. And that was the end of the conversation.
Grievance 3. Poop.
Poop?
Look, I understand that when you're teaching swim lessons to little kids, sometimes they're gonna poop in the pool. My problem is not that we had to deal with kids pooping in the pool. My problem is how management decided to handle these fecal incidents, as they called them. So, as a general rule, the higher the chlorine level of the pool, the less time you need to evacuate it when you encounter one of these fecal incidents. So, because these lessons were scheduled just like back to back to back to back the entire shift, they would keep the baseline chlorine levels of the pool like really high so that if a kid pooped in the pool, they would be less likely to have to cancel one of these lessons. And that meant that sometimes when a kid pooped in the pool, you were back in the water in as few as 20 minutes. Also, there's different requirements for how you're supposed to handle diarrhea versus regular poop. Because diarrhea can contain a parasite called Cryptosporidium, which has a much higher chlorine tolerance than the pathogens contained in regular poop. When someone has diarrhea in the pool, you have to crank the chlorine level to like 10 times the regular amount and close for like a whole day. Except closing for a whole day was bad for business. So instead, we just had to pretend like diarrhea was actually just regular poop that only looked like diarrhea because it had mixed with water whenever it happened. Which, that's not how that works. Like, when you poop in the toilet, your poop doesn't suddenly become diarrhea when it enters, like... Have you ever pooped in a toilet before? Does it just become diarrhea when it goes into the... Like, there's water in your toilet. And when the poop goes into the water, it does not suddenly become diarrhea. Alright, let's move on. I have this vivid memory from my first week on the job where a swim instructor was carrying a little kid towards the bathroom and diarrhea was just pouring from this kid's suit like a brown slurry just splashing onto the pool deck and hitting the walls and getting in the water. And not only did we not close down for the whole day like we should have, but the manager got mad at the supervisor who canceled the lessons that were supposed to start 10 minutes from when the kid pooped everywhere because none of it got in the water. It definitely did get in the water. I mean, like, 40 minutes later, when we opened back up, I remember teaching a swim lesson, working with a kid, and just watching this little, like, piece of poop just drift by me in the water. I'm just thinking to myself, you know, this doesn't really seem sanitary. Something about this just don't seem quite right.
Grievance 4. Money.
It didn't occur to me just how streamlined their business model was until I was making this video. This place was like a swim lesson factory. They would sometimes have 10 lanes of lessons happening at a time, with 4 students per lane, and they would book the lessons so close together that for the entire shift, sometimes I wouldn't have enough time in between any of my lessons to use the bathroom, so I just had to, like, pee in the pool all the time, which is actually really unhealthy, because when pee mixes with chlorine, it produces a chemical called trichloramine, which can cause asthma, irritate your eyes, and give you rashes. And because the pool was so warm, I needed to drink a lot of water to stay hydrated, so I ended up peeing in the pool a lot and would just regularly leave with big rashes all down my legs. Anyways, back to money. So, for each of these half-hour lessons, the company charged $24 per kid, and you would usually have, like, 4 kids in each of your classes. This means for every hour of lessons that I taught, the company grossed $192. I made $12 an hour. So out of all the money that the parents were paying for someone to teach their kids swim lessons, only about 6% of that was going to the person who was actually teaching their kids swim lessons. And look, I know that they had more costs than just me, right? They have to pay people to work at the front desk and to schedule shifts and to clean the building at night, and it costs money to keep the pool functioning. Fair enough. So, to get a better idea of how much surplus value each employee was generating, I decided to look up how much profit an average franchise owner of this company can expect to make a year, and divide it by my best guess for how many employees we had at the branch. What I found was that the surplus value that each employee was producing was somewhere in the range of $28,000 a year. This is how capitalism works. Some dude I've never met who is already a millionaire got to take 70 cents of every dollar I made because he owned the stuff I needed to do my job. And yes, technically speaking, my involvement there was voluntary, but anywhere else that I had the option of working at the time would have resulted in a similar exploitation of my labor, so my choice was really just picking who was going to screw me over. This idea that capitalists love to tout that competition over workers will drive wages up sounds great in theory, but it just doesn't play out that way for a lot of people. Like, this was the best job that I could find at the time, and around 70% of the value that I was generating was being pocketed by the franchise owner. If you're watching this video and you think capitalism is a good system, you might be thinking, well, you should have just started your own business then. And first of all, with what money? When I took this job, I had like $500 in the bank and $15,000 of student loans. To put together a business that could realistically compete, I would need tens of thousands of dollars of startup money. And, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't really have the skill set to start a business. Filling out paperwork makes me hyperventilate, I'm not a very organized person, and I'm terrible at replying to emails. But that doesn't mean that I deserve to have my labor be exploited like this.
Conclusion.
To be clear, I think the existence of swim schools is a good thing. Teaching people how to swim is a valuable service to the community, and having a centralized place where people can sign up to teach or learn swimming makes the whole process way easier than trying to coordinate this kind of thing individually. Under different circumstances, I think I could have really enjoyed working there. Nothing about this job was unavoidably miserable. Like, if the pool were worker-owned and operated democratically, we could have addressed the safety and scheduling concerns, and I would have made plenty of money for a decent living. Just that one change in who owns the means of production, in this case the pool, would make a huge difference. Though, it's worth noting that even worker-owned businesses would still have the primary driving force of the profit motive, incentivizing things like trade secrets and cost externalization. That's a concept that I explained in my video, Capitalism is Bad 101. I'll put a card in the corner. That corner? I don't know, one of these corners. Somewhere up there, a card is popping up. So, while worker-owned businesses would be a huge improvement on what we have now, that isn't going to single-handedly solve all of society's problems. Ideally, society would be fully cooperative instead of competitive, and the means of production would be owned collectively by everyone and operated with the goal of meeting human need. What would that look like in practice? I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty confident that it would involve a lot of dismantling hierarchical systems and replacing them with more democratic alternatives, but the question of how should society be organized is a complicated one, and I don't want to give folks the impression that I have all the answers. I don't. I'm just some dingleberry on the internet who feels constantly overwhelmed by the weight of the world's suffering and thinks something better is possible. Anyways, thanks for listening to me rant about a crummy job I had one time, and also capitalism. If you have a bad job story that you want to share, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. You'd be helping to normalize talking about problems in the workplace and supporting my channel in the process. Or, better yet, you can make your own video and send it to me. Speaking of which, hello, fellow traveler, and welcome to the Content Void. I roam these boundless cosmos in search of small leftist projects to use as offerings for Lord Oculon, whose gaze pierces all planes of existence. Agents of Lord Oculon's influence may already be familiar with today's creator, Z Matthews. Xenia is a YouTuber and film student who uses her artistic talent to make videos that are not only thought-provoking, but impactful on an emotional level and visually stunning on top of it all. She's currently working on her senior thesis, a film about police brutality that draws from her own experience of terror when her partner was violently arrested and unlawfully detained by the police. Unfortunately, the computer she's been using to edit her work with is 7 years old and has been randomly shutting down during editing sessions. A while back, Z started a GoFundMe to buy a new computer, as well as some other filming equipment for her thesis, and as of this recording, she's still about $1,500 short of her goal. If you're watching this, and you have the means, please consider donating to her campaign. If you've seen any of Z's videos, you don't need me to tell you that the world is a better place for their existence. And if you haven't seen any of her videos, I've got some fun homework for you. Are you a small leftist content creator whose projects are out here somewhere, lying in wait of discovery in the eternal void? If so, send me an email over at ryanhibbseditor@gmail.com with your name, pronouns, and a link to the project you'd like showcased, and yours might be the next thing I discover in the content void. Farewell for now. Hey, thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, you can help grow my influence by leaving a sacrifice to the YouTube algorithm in the form of a like, comment, or by subscribing to my channel. And if you want to help support me financially, well, you can do that over at patreon.com/RyanHibbs. If you support my channel, you get a thank you at the end of each video, so big thank yous to Questing Refuge, Caitlin Graves, Amy Tasukada, Jamie Lee, Ian Salyers, Austin Brehab, Charismatic Insanity, Erica Watson, Ian Minchis, Alex, Ulrich Volker Anderson, Otto, Benjamin Kuhn, Alex Guichet, Carly Bell Jones, JC Urbina, Al Swigert, Crystal, Thomas Cranador Hahn, Grace Barkoff, Zach, Ruby, Matt Buffano, Paul Flores, Ben Lewis, Socialism and Revolution, Kukilia, Jennifer Fronister, Cafe Softy, Neo is Not the One, Linda, Jean Morrow, and Madeline Jacobson. I really appreciate the continued patience and support that my patrons have showed me. I've been having a lot of anxiety around making videos because I'm worried about making mistakes and misinforming people. Like, for example, in my Mario Kart and Anarchy video, I'm kind of worried that I might have presented a little bit of a reductive explanation of anarchy that doesn't really account for the sort of broad spectrum of beliefs that can fall under that umbrella. Honestly, I don't know how content creators deal with mistakes. Like, this stuff keeps me up at night. Well, to be fair, it's not the only thing that keeps me up at night. There's also, like, the fact that we're destroying the only planet that's remotely capable of supporting human life, and also the, fact that I'm gonna die someday. That keeps me up. And, like, a bunch of really embarrassing stuff that I said and did when I was in high school. Gosh, isn't being a human fun? I should go call my therapist. Hope everyone else's year is off to a better start than mine. See you next time.